My child, before this message ends, someone who has been standing close to you for far too long will no longer have the power to influence your future, and when you finally understand who this person truly is, your heart will be shaken because you never imagined that the same face that smiled at you could secretly celebrate your delays. You have questioned yourself for too long, blamed yourself for things that were never your fault, and wondered why every time your life seemed ready to move forward, something unseen pulled you backward. Today that hidden force is being exposed, and the truth will leave you speechless because the name connected to this story is not the one you have been expecting. Listen carefully. For a long time you believed that every obstacle in your life was simply bad timing, bad luck, or a lesson you needed to learn. But what you could not see was that someone around you had quietly become comfortable watching you remain stuck. They never attacked you openly because open enemies are easy to recognize. Instead, they chose a different path. They encouraged your doubts, questioned your confidence, planted fear inside your decisions, and disguised their jealousy as concern. Whenever you were about to step into a new opportunity, they reminded you of your failures. Whenever your spirit became hopeful, they filled your mind with uncertainty. Whenever your soulmate's heart naturally moved toward you, this person somehow appeared with another reason to create distance. At first it seemed like coincidence, then it became a pattern, and eventually it became a chain that neither you nor your soulmate could clearly understand. Don't skip. Because what happens next explains why so many things suddenly stopped making sense in your life. Every delay carried the fingerprints of someone who smiled in front of you but secretly feared the day you finally found peace. They knew that once your confidence returned, once your soulmate found the courage to trust their own heart again, their influence would disappear forever. That is why they worked quietly, never loudly, never carelessly, always making sure their words sounded helpful while their intentions remained hidden. They praised you in public but questioned you in private. They defended you in front of strangers but criticized you behind closed doors. They acted as though they wanted the best for you while secretly hoping your biggest blessings would never arrive. You sensed something was wrong many times, yet your kindness kept giving them another chance because your heart refused to believe that someone so familiar could carry such hidden darkness. Meanwhile, your soulmate was living through a battle they could not explain. No matter how hard they tried to move forward, something always pulled them back toward thoughts of you. They met new people, listened to different opinions, tried convincing themselves that forgetting you was the right decision, yet your name refused to leave their heart. Every quiet moment brought back memories they thought had disappeared forever. Every future they imagined somehow felt incomplete without you standing beside them. The more they resisted, the stronger those feelings became, and this frustrated the very person who had been working against your connection all along. That person noticed every small sign. They noticed when your soulmate smiled after hearing your name. They noticed when your soulmate became silent after someone mentioned your kindness. They noticed when your soulmate defended you without even realizing it. Fear slowly replaced their confidence because deep inside they understood one truth: they could only control the situation as long as the truth remained hidden. The moment the truth came into the light, everything they had built through manipulation would begin collapsing. Don't skip. Because the next moment changed the direction of every life connected to this story. One evening, during what seemed like an ordinary conversation, someone casually asked your soulmate a simple question: if everything you have been told about this person turned out to be false, what would you do? The room instantly became silent. Your soulmate looked confused because no one had ever challenged the story they had been hearing for so long. Before they could answer, the person who had spent months influencing them interrupted the conversation much too quickly. Their voice became sharper than usual. They insisted there was nothing left to discuss. They tried changing the subject. They even laughed to make the question sound unimportant. But sometimes people reveal themselves not through what they say, but through what they desperately try to stop others from asking. Your soulmate noticed that reaction immediately. It was the first crack in a wall of deception that had stood for far too long. That night your soulmate could not sleep. The same question kept repeating inside their mind. Why was that person so afraid of the truth? Why had every conversation about you always ended with pressure instead of proof? Why had they never been shown real evidence, only endless warnings? One memory after another suddenly returned. They remembered every time they almost contacted you and were interrupted. They remembered every important decision that had somehow been influenced by the same individual. They remembered every strange feeling they ignored because they trusted the wrong voice instead of their own heart. Then something happened that nobody expected. A private voice message, never meant for your soulmate to hear, accidentally reached them. At first they almost ignored it, believing it had been sent by mistake. But after pressing play, their entire world stopped. The voice belonged to the very person who had always claimed to care the most. Yet there was no kindness in their words. There was no concern. There was only jealousy, frustration, and fear. They admitted they could never allow your soulmate to reconnect with you because they knew your presence would change everything. They confessed that keeping you apart had become easier than they expected because fear is easier to spread than truth. They even laughed while saying your soulmate would never discover what had really been happening behind the scenes. In that single moment, every missing piece finally came together. The confusion disappeared. The manipulation became visible. The lies lost their power. And for the very first time, your soulmate whispered your name without fear, realizing that the person they had trusted most was the very person standing between them and the future they were always meant to have. Don't skip. Your soulmate replayed that voice message again and again, hoping they had misunderstood it, hoping there was another explanation, hoping the person they trusted had simply spoken in anger, but the more they listened, the clearer the truth became. Every sentence exposed months of hidden manipulation. Every pause revealed fear instead of love. Every word confirmed that someone had been quietly steering their decisions, not for their protection, but for their own selfish purpose. Their hands began to shake as memories they had buried suddenly returned with painful clarity. They remembered the exact day they almost reached out to you after dreaming about you for 3 nights in a row, only for this person to appear unexpectedly with a dramatic story designed to change their mind. They remembered another moment when they had smiled while looking at one of your old photographs, and within minutes the same individual insisted they should delete every reminder of you and move on forever. At the time it seemed like good advice. Now it felt like calculated control. Piece by piece, every coincidence transformed into evidence. Every warning transformed into manipulation. Every delay suddenly had a face behind it. Your soulmate realized they had never truly walked away from you by choice. They had been carefully pushed away, one lie at a time. They could no longer sit still. Without saying a word to anyone, they walked outside into the quiet night, carrying nothing except the weight of the truth they had just discovered. The silence around them felt different now. It no longer felt empty. It felt as though something invisible had finally been lifted from their shoulders. For the first time in a very long time, they allowed themselves to ask a question they had avoided for months. What if everything I believed about them was false? The answer came almost immediately because their heart had never stopped believing in you. They remembered your patience when everyone else became impatient. They remembered your loyalty when others expected you to give up. They remembered that you had never tried to control them, never forced them to choose, never manipulated their emotions, never demanded proof of love. You simply loved with honesty and waited with dignity. That realization broke something inside them. They whispered your name again, this time with tears in their eyes, realizing that while you had been protecting the connection with silence, someone else had been destroying it with deception. Don't skip. Because what happened next became the moment that person never saw coming. The very next morning, your soulmate asked to meet the person whose lies had shaped so many of their decisions. They agreed confidently, believing they still had complete control over the situation. They walked into the meeting wearing the same familiar smile, expecting another easy conversation, another opportunity to twist the truth, another chance to keep you out of the picture forever. But something was different. Your soulmate did not look confused anymore. They did not look uncertain anymore. They looked calm. The kind of calm that appears only after someone finally discovers the truth. The conversation began normally, but within minutes your soulmate placed their phone on the table and quietly pressed play. The room instantly filled with the sound of the very voice message that was never supposed to be heard. Every word echoed through the silence. Every confession became impossible to deny. Every lie collapsed under the weight of its own truth. The smile disappeared from that person's face. Their confidence vanished. Their excuses came too late. They tried saying the recording was taken out of context. They claimed they were only trying to protect your soulmate. They insisted everything had been misunderstood. But lies become powerless the moment undeniable truth enters the room. Your soulmate looked directly into their eyes and asked only one question. How long were you planning to keep me away from the person I truly love? There was no answer. Only silence. The kind of silence that reveals more than words ever could. And in that unforgettable moment, the person who had secretly stood between you and your destiny realized they were no longer controlling the story. Because the truth had finally taken their place. Don't skip. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. No one moved. No one spoke. The person who had spent so much time controlling every conversation suddenly had nothing left to say because the truth had taken away the only weapon they ever possessed. Deception. Your soulmate slowly stood up, picked up the phone, and looked at them one final time. There was no anger in their eyes anymore, only disappointment. All this time, they said quietly, I thought I was protecting my future by listening to you. But I was actually walking away from the person who never stopped loving me. Those words landed like thunder inside the room. The guilty person tried one last time to defend themselves, claiming they had only wanted what was best, claiming they feared you would hurt your soulmate, claiming they had sacrificed everything out of love. But your soulmate had already learned the difference between genuine concern and hidden control. Real love gives freedom. Manipulation creates fear. Real love encourages truth. Manipulation hides behind confusion. Real love never needs lies to survive. In that moment, every excuse sounded empty. Every explanation sounded rehearsed. Every mask finally slipped away. Don't skip. Because what happened next was something nobody in that room expected. One by one, other people who had remained silent for months finally began speaking. Someone admitted they had noticed strange behavior long ago but never wanted to interfere. Another confessed they had overheard conversations that never felt right. Someone else revealed that several important messages meant for your soulmate had mysteriously disappeared before they were ever seen. The room slowly transformed into a place of confession instead of denial. Secrets that had remained buried for months surfaced one after another until the entire picture became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate realized the manipulation had been far deeper than they imagined. It had not been one single lie. It had been hundreds of small lies carefully connected together until they resembled the truth. Every missing opportunity, Every delayed conversation, every unnecessary misunderstanding, every painful separation suddenly made perfect sense. The person responsible looked around desperately, hoping someone would defend them, but no one did. For the first time they stood completely alone, surrounded not by enemies, but by the consequences of their own choices. Later that evening your soulmate returned home carrying a heart that felt both broken and relieved. Broken because they had lost trust in someone they once believed completely. Relieved because they finally knew you had never been the problem. They walked into a quiet room, opened an old box they had not touched in months, and inside they found something they thought they would never look at again. A photograph of you together. They stared at it for a long time without speaking. Every memory returned with unbelievable clarity. They remembered the promises that had once felt unbreakable. They remembered your laughter, your kindness, the way you believed in them before anyone else did. Then they whispered something they had been afraid to admit even to themselves. I should have listened to my own heart. Tears slowly filled their eyes because they finally understood that while they had been searching everywhere for peace, the person who brought them that peace had been you all along. They reached for their phone more than once, wanting to call you immediately, wanting to explain everything, wanting to apologize for every moment of silence. But they stopped. Not because they no longer cared, but because they feared they had already waited too long. Little did they know, at that very same moment, your life was also beginning to change in ways neither of you could yet imagine, because the removal of one toxic person was only the first step. The next revelation would expose a hidden truth that had been protected for years, and when that truth finally reached both of you, nothing would ever be the same again. Don't skip. Your soulmate placed the phone on the table and closed their eyes, but the silence around them was louder than any voice they had ever heard. The recording had ended, yet the truth continued echoing inside their heart. For months they had believed they were making wise decisions, protecting their future, choosing the safest path, but now every decision felt contaminated by someone else's deception. They walked toward the window and looked outside, remembering the countless moments they almost reached out to you but somehow changed their mind at the very last second. It no longer felt like coincidence. It felt like someone had carefully redirected every step they took. Then something unexpected happened. Their phone vibrated. It was a message from someone who had remained completely silent throughout the entire situation. The message was only one sentence long. If you truly want to know everything, meet me tonight. I can prove that you were never told the whole story. Your soulmate stared at those words for several minutes. Their heartbeat became faster because deep inside they knew another layer of the truth was waiting to be uncovered. They replied with only one word. Where? Hours later they arrived at a quiet place far away from the noise of the city. The person waiting for them looked nervous, constantly checking over their shoulder as though afraid someone might be watching. Without wasting time, they placed a small envelope on the table and pushed it toward your soulmate. "I should have given you this months ago," they whispered, "but I was threatened into staying silent." Your soulmate slowly opened the envelope. Inside were printed messages, screenshots, and handwritten notes they had never seen before. Every page carried the same shocking pattern. There were conversations discussing how to keep you separated, how to make your soulmate doubt your loyalty, how to delay every possible reunion, and even plans to introduce new people into your soulmate's life before they could reconnect with you. One sentence froze them completely. "If they ever start trusting their heart again, we lose everything." Those words changed everything. Your soulmate realized this had never been a misunderstanding. It had been a carefully planned campaign to destroy a connection that terrified someone else. Don't skip. Because the next discovery shook them even more than the recording itself. As they continued reading, one final document slipped from the envelope onto the table. It was older than everything else. The date at the top revealed it had been written long before the separation even began. Your soulmate unfolded it carefully, expecting another conversation, but instead they found a list of names. Most of the names meant nothing. Until their own name appeared beside yours. Next to both names, someone had written a chilling sentence in bold ink. "Never allow these two to reunite." Your soulmate's hands immediately began trembling. This wasn't a lie created yesterday. This wasn't a recent manipulation. Someone had been planning to keep you apart long before either of you realized what was happening. Every unanswered message, every canceled meeting, every sudden misunderstanding, every emotional distance. It had all been building toward this single goal. Tears rolled down their face as they whispered, "All this time, they weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves." At that exact moment, your soulmate made a decision they had never been brave enough to make before. They picked up their phone, searched for your name, and placed their finger over the call button. They took one deep breath, ready to hear your voice after everything that had happened. But just before the call connected, an unknown number flashed across the screen. They almost ignored it, but something inside told them to answer. The voice on the other end spoke only one sentence before the line went silent. "Don't call yet. If you do, both of your lives could be in danger. Because the person being removed from your life hasn't made their final move yet. Don't skip." Your soulmate slowly turned toward the sound of the footsteps, but before anyone reached the room, they quickly closed the diary and hid it beneath their jacket. Every instinct told them that whoever was approaching could not be trusted. The footsteps grew louder until they finally stopped outside the door. For a few long seconds, there was complete silence. Then a calm voice spoke from the other side. "I know you're in there. And if you've already opened that diary, it's too late to turn back." Your soulmate refused to answer. Their heart pounded as they searched the room for another exit. At the back of the storage room, hidden behind a broken shelf, they noticed a narrow door that had almost blended into the wall. Without making a sound, they slipped through it just as the main door burst open behind them. They never looked back. They only ran, holding the diary tighter with every step because they knew that whatever was written inside it was valuable enough for someone to chase them through the night. After leaving the building, they drove for nearly an hour before stopping in a deserted place where no one could easily find them. Only then did they reopen the diary. This time they started reading from the middle instead of the beginning. Page after page exposed conversations that should never have existed. There were dates matching every important moment of your separation. There were detailed plans explaining how misunderstandings had been created before either of you even realized what was happening. One entry read, "Today they almost spoke again, but I stopped it before the conversation could begin." Another page said, "They still feel connected. Increase the pressure before they trust their heart again." Your soulmate's breathing became heavier with every sentence. They finally understood that many of the painful moments they had blamed on fate had actually been carefully arranged by someone who feared your reunion more than anything else. But then they reached a page that made them freeze completely. Written across the top in large letters was a sentence that changed everything. The final secret must never reach them. Your soulmate immediately turned the page, expecting another confession, but instead they found a folded letter tucked inside the diary. The paper had grown old with time, yet your name was written clearly across the front. Their hands trembled as they unfolded it. The letter revealed that years earlier, someone had discovered a truth about you and your soulmate that was intentionally hidden from both of you. According to the writer, the moment both of you learned that truth, every lie holding your lives apart would collapse forever. That was the real reason people kept interfering whenever destiny tried bringing you together. It was never only about jealousy. It was about preventing a truth powerful enough to change everything. Before your soulmate could finish reading the final paragraph, another folded note slipped onto the ground. It contained only one chilling sentence. "If you're reading this, they're already watching you." At that exact moment, bright headlights appeared in the distance, slowly moving toward the place where your soulmate had stopped, and they instantly realized the diary had not only revealed the truth. It had also revealed their location. Don't skip. The headlights came closer until they stopped only a few feet away. Your soulmate immediately switched off their own car lights and remained completely still, barely breathing. They watched as two figures stepped out of the vehicle, carrying flashlights and speaking in low voices. One of them said, "They can't be far. Search every corner. We cannot let that diary leave tonight." The moment your soulmate heard those words, every doubt disappeared. The diary was real. The danger was real. And the person who had spent so many months keeping you apart was now desperate to erase every piece of evidence before it reached you. Holding the diary tightly against their chest, your soulmate quietly slipped out through the opposite side of the road, disappearing into the darkness before the search reached the place where they had been parked only moments earlier. They kept walking until the voices faded behind them. Only then did they stop beside an abandoned chapel where the silence felt strangely peaceful. Sitting on the old stone steps, they opened the diary once again, determined to finish reading it no matter what happened next. Several pages later they discovered something even more unbelievable. The handwriting suddenly changed. It was no longer the handwriting of the person who had planned the separation. It belonged to someone else. Someone who had secretly witnessed everything but had been too afraid to speak. The first sentence read, "I stayed silent because I feared them." But if this diary is ever found, the person reading it deserves the complete truth. Your soulmate leaned closer. Every line that followed answered questions they had carried for years. The writer explained that the lies against you had never been based on anything you actually did. They were invented because your kindness, your loyalty, and the deep connection between you and your soulmate threatened someone who needed control more than love. The diary even described how innocent conversations had been twisted, how simple misunderstandings had been turned into permanent wounds, and how every attempt you made to reconnect had been blocked before your soulmate ever knew it happened. Then came the sentence that made your soulmate lower the diary and cover their face with both hands. They still don't know that you tried to reach them 7 different times. Tears filled their eyes immediately. 7 times. You had tried 7 different times, and they had never known. Every message had been intercepted. Every letter had disappeared. Every opportunity had been stolen before it ever reached them. They whispered your name over and over again, realizing how much pain both of you had suffered because of lies neither of you created. Don't skip. Just as they turned another page, a small photograph slipped from inside the diary and landed on the ground. Your soulmate picked it up carefully. It was old, slightly faded, but unmistakable. The photograph showed you smiling beside someone whose face had been deliberately scratched out with black ink. On the back, someone had written a sentence in trembling handwriting. "This is the person who started everything." Your soulmate stared at the scratched-out face, trying desperately to recognize who it had been, but the damage was too severe. Then they noticed another folded paper hidden behind the photograph. Unlike every other page, this one contained only a location, a date, and a time. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. The truth ends here. No explanation. No signature. Nothing else. Their heart raced because they instinctively knew this was not an invitation. It was a final confrontation. Whoever wrote that note expected someone to arrive there. Whether it was to expose the last secret or to bury it forever, your soulmate could not tell. But one thing had become absolutely clear. The person being removed from your life had realized their entire plan was collapsing, and they were preparing one last desperate move. Your soulmate closed the diary, looked toward the rising sun on the horizon, and made a promise they had never been more certain of. No matter who stands in my way, no matter what truth waits for me tomorrow, I will find them. I will tell them everything. And this time, no one will separate us again. Little did they know that while they were making that promise, you had already received an unexpected message from an unknown sender containing only 5 chilling words. Don't trust your soulmate tomorrow. Don't skip. You stared at the message for what felt like forever. 5 simple words. Don't trust your soulmate tomorrow. No explanation. No name. No reason. Just a warning that arrived at the exact moment your soulmate was preparing to fight through every lie to reach you. At first, fear whispered that maybe this message was true. Maybe everything you believed was about to fall apart again. But then another thought entered your heart. What if this is one final attempt to stop the reunion? The same people who had manipulated the past understood one thing better than anyone else. They no longer had control over your soulmate, so the only person left to deceive was you. If they could fill your heart with doubt just one more time, they could still keep both of you separated. That was their final chance. That was their last move. Somewhere else, your soulmate received another anonymous message at almost the same moment. It read, "They're already gone. Stop looking." They smiled sadly, locked the phone, and whispered, "Too many lies have already stolen enough time from us. I'm not listening anymore." For the first time in months, they chose their heart instead of someone else's voice. That single decision changed everything. The following evening, your soulmate arrived at the location written inside the diary. It was an old building that looked abandoned from the outside, but inside the lights were already on. The atmosphere felt strangely heavy, as though every secret carried for years had gathered in one place, waiting to be exposed. Several familiar faces were already there. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others looked frightened. And standing quietly near the center of the room was the very person who had spent so long controlling every step of your journey. They no longer looked confident. They no longer smiled. They understood the diary had survived. And with it, so had the truth. Your soulmate slowly walked into the room, placed the diary on the table, and without raising their voice asked one question. "Before I open this in front of everyone, does anyone want to tell the truth?" No one answered. The silence lasted nearly a full minute. Then an elderly person, who had remained quiet for years, finally stood up and said, "It's time they know everything." The room instantly froze. That person revealed that years ago, when your connection first began growing stronger, someone became deeply afraid of losing their influence over your soulmate. They feared that once true love entered your soulmate's life, they would no longer be able to manipulate decisions, emotions, or the future. Instead of accepting that reality, they chose deception. They twisted conversations, intercepted messages, spread false stories, encouraged misunderstandings, and slowly built a wall between two people who had never truly wanted to leave each other. Every painful separation, every unanswered message, every broken promise, every delayed reunion had one hidden source. Then the elderly person pointed directly toward the one responsible and quietly said, "You never hated them. You feared what they represented." Tears filled several eyes around the room because everyone finally understood the real reason behind years of suffering. The guilty person lowered their head and, for the first time, admitted the truth. "I knew if you ever found your way back to each other, I would lose the only control I had left." Those words echoed through the room like the closing chapter of a long nightmare. Your soulmate closed the diary one final time. There was no victory in their heart, only relief. They picked up their phone, searched for your name, and pressed the call button without hesitation. This time there were no interruptions, no mysterious messages, no voices telling them to walk away. Only the sound of the phone ringing. Once, twice, 3 times, until finally someone answered. For a few seconds neither of you spoke. After everything that had happened, words seemed too small to carry the weight of the moment. Then your soulmate quietly said, "I finally know the truth. And if you're willing to give me one chance, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'll never let anyone come between us again." On the other end of the line, tears fell before a single word was spoken. The lies had finally ended. The silence had finally broken. The person who had lived for years by keeping you apart had lost the one thing they could never recover: control. And from that moment forward, your future would no longer be written by fear, manipulation, or hidden agendas, but by truth, trust, and the courage to choose each other despite everything that had happened. The chapter of separation was finally over. And the chapter you were always meant to live had just begun. Don't skip. Just when both of you believed the nightmare was finally over, something happened that nobody expected. 3 days after that emotional phone call, your soulmate received a plain brown envelope with no return address, no signature, and no explanation. Inside was only a single sheet of paper. Across the top, written in bold black ink, were the words, "This is the last secret they never wanted you to know." Your soulmate's hands immediately began trembling because after everything that had already been exposed, they couldn't imagine what secret could possibly remain hidden. Slowly unfolding the paper, they discovered a list of dates. Dates that matched every major turning point in both of your lives. The day you first met. The day you unexpectedly stopped speaking. The day your soulmate almost contacted you. The day another relationship was introduced. The day someone convinced them to walk away. Every single date had one thing in common. Next to each one was the same handwriting and the same initials. Suddenly your soulmate realized something terrifying. None of the painful events in your journey had been random. Someone had been present at every single turning point, quietly influencing every decision without either of you noticing. The pattern was too perfect to ignore. The separation had never been accidental. It had been carefully maintained from the very beginning. Without wasting another second, your soulmate drove directly to your home. This time they refused to make another phone call because too many important conversations had been interrupted before. They wanted to look into your eyes while telling you everything. As they arrived, you were already standing outside, almost as though your heart had known they were coming. Neither of you spoke for several long moments. There was nothing left to prove. The truth had already spoken louder than either of you ever could. Then your soulmate handed you the envelope. You quietly read every page until your eyes reached the final paragraph. Tears immediately filled your eyes because the last sentence answered the question that had lived inside your heart for years. It read, "The greatest lie was never that they stopped loving each other. The greatest lie was convincing them that the other one had." You slowly looked up, unable to hold back your emotions anymore. Every lonely night. Every unanswered prayer. Every moment you believed you had been forgotten, suddenly collapsed under the weight of one simple truth. Love had never disappeared. It had only been buried beneath deception. Don't skip. As the sun began to set, both of you made a decision together. Instead of chasing the people responsible, instead of seeking revenge, instead of reopening old wounds, you chose something they never expected. Peace. Because the greatest punishment for those who spent years trying to destroy your future was watching both of you build the life they worked so hard to prevent. The lies had finally reached their end. The manipulation had finally lost its power. The names that once created fear no longer carried any control over your hearts. As you both walked away together, leaving the envelope behind, the wind lifted the final page into the air. On the back of that page, hidden until the very end, was one final handwritten sentence. Destiny can be delayed, but it can never be stolen. And with those words, every unanswered question finally found its answer, every broken chapter found its ending, and every tear that had fallen throughout the journey became proof that truth always arrives, even if it takes years. The person who was removed from your life disappeared into the past, but the love that survived every lie stepped into the future stronger than ever before. This was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of the life that had been waiting for both of you all along. Don't skip. Months passed, yet the story refused to end the way anyone expected. Peace had finally returned to both of your lives, but destiny still had one final chapter waiting to be revealed. One quiet evening, while both of you were sorting through old belongings that had remained untouched for years, your soulmate opened a small wooden box hidden at the back of an old cabinet. They almost ignored it because it looked ordinary, covered with dust and forgotten by time. But inside the box was something neither of you had ever seen before. A sealed envelope with both of your names written together in elegant handwriting. There was no sender, no date, only one sentence across the front: "Open this only after the truth has been revealed." Your soulmate looked at you in complete disbelief. Neither of you remembered seeing it before. Slowly, with trembling hands, the seal was broken. Inside was a handwritten letter from someone who had witnessed everything from the very beginning. The first line immediately brought silence to the room. If you are reading this, then it means the lies have finally lost, and the truth has finally won. Every word that followed explained what no one else had been able to explain. The writer admitted they had watched innocent people suffer because of one person's obsession with control. They confessed they wanted to speak years earlier, but fear kept them silent. They described how they saw messages being hidden, conversations being interrupted, lies repeated until they sounded like truth, and opportunities destroyed before either of you even realized they existed. Then came the final confession. "No matter how hard they tried, I always knew one day destiny would bring you back together, because real love survives what deception never can." Tears rolled down both of your faces as you reached the final paragraph. The letter ended with a blessing instead of a warning. Do not waste another day looking backward. The people who created the pain have already lost. Your greatest victory is not exposing them. Your greatest victory is choosing each other after everything you survived. You both remained silent for several minutes before your soulmate gently took your hand. There were no dramatic promises left to make because actions had already replaced words. The fear that once controlled both of your hearts had completely disappeared. The names that once caused anxiety no longer had any power. The voices that once filled your minds with doubt had been replaced by trust. Looking into your eyes, your soulmate smiled and quietly said, "If I had listened to my heart from the beginning, we would never have lost so much time. But from this day forward, no one else will write our story except us." In that moment, the past finally released its grip. The unanswered questions no longer mattered. The betrayals no longer defined your future. Every painful chapter became nothing more than a reminder of how powerful truth becomes when it finally reaches the light. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, both of you walked forward together without looking back even once. Behind you remained years of confusion, manipulation, broken trust, hidden agendas, and people who believed they could rewrite destiny. Ahead of you stood a future built on honesty, courage, forgiveness, and a love that had survived every obstacle placed in its path. The greatest lesson of this journey was never about the person who tried to separate you. It was about discovering that no lie, no betrayal, no manipulation, and no amount of time is stronger than a bond that is meant to endure. Some people enter your life to test your faith. Others enter to reveal your strength. And a very rare few remain because they were always meant to walk beside you.